All right, we're here at Bloggapalooza 2006. I'm with Bill Callahan, one of the co-founders of Meet the Bloggers. And he blogs at Callahan's ClevelandDiary.com.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about Meet the Bloggers. I mean, how did that really start out in the ball?
Well, what Meet the Bloggers is a series of podcast interviews that have been done over the last year with a lot of politicians and a number of other community leaders, some writers, some cultural folks. It started off last summer, actually started off in August of last summer, in the midst of the Democratic primary in Cleveland. And it started because George Nemeth was bitching online about how there was some podcast he didn't like, and was somebody ever going to do better podcasting about better interviewing about the election? And I wrote on the comment and said, well, maybe we're it,
And that's where it started.
If you want it to happen, maybe we have to make it happen. And so he and Tim Russo and I ended up talking about just starting to do a series of interviews. We were beginning to have blogger meetups at that point. It became a topic at one of the blogger meetups, and we said, fine, let's just start calling the mayoral candidates and see if we can get them. And as I remember, Anthony, the first one who said yes was Bob Triazzi, and that was because of you. So the actual answer to the question, how to Meet the Bloggers get started, is that you got us Bob Triazzi. If you hadn't done that, we probably never would have started. It's now expanded to include a fair number of other interviewers. Gloria Ferris is actually doing scheduling now. But it's still the same basic deal, which is people go sit down at Talkies or some other place and spend an hour asking questions and getting them answered.
If you go back and you listen to the very first podcast with Bob Triazzi, and Tom, you still got us? Okay, barely. If you go back and listen to the first podcast with Bob Triazzi and compare it to today, I mean, the quality's night and day. But how did you go into the first Meet the Bloggers interview? I mean, how did you prepare for that? Like, what did you expect? Did you have kind of a set format in your mind, or did you just kind of wing it and go on the fly? Or
well, I had 4 questions that I wanted to get answered, and I think the general idea that George and Tim and I were pretty clear about was that the idea was we were going to sit down for an hour and we were going to ask questions and let them be answered. And so the main thing was to come in with questions. And if we didn't get an answer, then we'd follow it up and try to get an answer. But beyond that, the purpose wasn't to argue or talk. The purpose was to get answers, because we really wanted to create a record of the candidates' answers to questions on issues that mattered to us. So, I mean, that was a pretty simple format. But I think beyond that, it just evolved from what turned out to be a pretty good combination of styles.
Do you feel that format has really worked? I mean, have you been able to drill down and get the kinds of answers you've been looking for from people, or do you still have kind of soundbite? It seems to have kind of kept the soundbites.
I think we keep the soundbites to a minimum, and I think it didn't take us long to figure out that this format was actually very attractive to candidates. I mean, they had to believe that somebody was going to hear it, I suppose, and that's still an interesting question. But the format itself was, people basically sitting down and saying, "Please tell us what you think about this public issue," and being interested in the answers. You don't actually get that very often in a campaign, so it's good exercise. It's good stretching exercise, and the discussion was respectful and interested, and so our sense of this was that candidates liked it, enjoyed it, and that we almost immediately started getting calls from people saying, "We'd like to do this too." We really have not had to pursue very many people. And so, I have no clue to this day how many people actually listen to or read those interviews. I just don't know how much of an impact we've had. There was an interesting moment 4 or 5 months ago, when Cranes, of all places, Cranes Cleveland Business, in an editorial, recommended that people go listen to Ted Strickland's Meet the Blogger interview in order to discover what he was saying about state issues. So I guess that tells you something positive. And we know that they get listened to by reporters and other folks who are,
But they don't necessarily
issue wonks, right? But how many voters are paying attention, I don't think we know. And on some level, it's probably the network effect among bloggers and their friends as much as anything that matters.
Talk a little bit about your blog.